I saw this video that you did with Jordan Peterson, and he
Mm,
was debating Michael Eric Dyson, the black guy.
yes. Yes.
And I thought that Jordan Peterson served Michael Eric Dyson on a platter. I thought he
Mm,
handled Dyson in a perfect way, in the way I've
yes.
never seen anyone handle such a phony person like Michael Dyson. I've never seen a white man deal with him in that way, or anyone really.
Mm. That was one of my first videos, like one of my first 10 videos or so, I think, from memory. But yeah, the way I see that one is it's just simple. Michael Eric Dyson is a charlatan. He's a snake oil salesman, and what he does is he takes very, very simple ideas and he tries to complicate them as much as possible.
Yeah,
And this is something you see a lot these days with leftists. They're not intelligent enough to take complicated ideas and simplify them and make them palatable for everybody. So then they'll take the simple ideas and make them complicated. And then
yeah,
Jordan Peterson actually gets a lot of pushback from people like that because they say, "Oh, he's not a real academic. He's so simple. He just says clean your room." But they don't see the genius in that he's taken a complicated idea and made it simple. And then
yes.
they'll see Michael Eric Dyson will use as many big words as he possibly can that he doesn't need to. And that's the way I see that.
I I've debated Dyson before a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, and I've said that this guy he's saying a lot of words, so-called big words, really fast,
Mhm,
and then he'll throw in some emotional, stupid stuff. And if you're not paying attention to what he's saying, because he says nothing, you
mhm,
react to the racism or whatever he says without realizing he said nothing, but he got you
mhm.
emotional about throwing in stupid stuff like that.
Well, it's a word salad. What he does is he just puts in lots of different words into the salad, and then he says something really emotional like racism, or
Yeah,
he says narcissism, or something that makes people emotional. But the most sinister part in my mind about using all those big words is that the regular person who just tunes into that and watches that will think, "Oh, this guy's using all these big words. He must be smart. He
right.
must know what he's talking about."
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He's not like you said, he's not saying anything. Whereas
No,
Jordan Peterson in that debate is saying very profound things, but in a way that you can kind of understand and interpret.
you have to be dumb to speak that fast. It doesn't make sense to speak that fast anyway. It's definitely a
Yeah.
cover up. Um, the other white guy that was with Peterson, who was he?
Stephen Fry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he's a British intellectual. He's generally a leftist. I think he's like the atheist leftist type of thing. So I have my disagreement points with Stephen Fry, but I mean, in general, he's a brilliant man and he's extremely sophisticated. He always carries himself gracefully in debates, and he's got some great books. Mythos, funny enough, from an atheist writing a book about Greek mythology,
Right.
it's a beautiful book. Um, but yeah, no, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, he dealt with Michael as well. He wasn't afraid to speak up, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think at one point he called him a snake oil salesman and like a pulpit, like pulpit snake oil salesman or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
It was really good.
It was an amazing debate. I really liked it. And it was unusual for me because I don't see white men using or are courageous enough to speak up and deal with black men or women in the manner that those two guys dealt with Dyson.
Yeah, well, I think that for the most part these days, you'll get white people who are basically not commenting at all on issues where
Yeah.
there's a black person even involved,
Yeah.
because they think that they've basically taken the pill and they've swallowed it, where they think that, oh, I better not talk about this because my lived experience. I mean, as if there's any what's the opposite of lived experience?
Yeah.
I don't know, but they think that they're because of their lived life experience that they're not black, so they can't talk about it. So it's one of those things that I could go all day about, but yeah.
And so are are you afraid to speak up about the blacks?
No. No, I'm not afraid to speak up about blacks. I'm not afraid to speak up about Asians. I'm not afraid to speak up about anybody. I'm not afraid to speak up about abortion because I'm not a woman. I think that if there's any ideas that come down, if there's any epistemology that we need to discuss that's important in society, everybody should have a say. And whoever's opinion or whoever's point of view and perspective is the best will win at the end of the day if we have the debate. If we don't have the debate,
Yeah.
then it's the person who has the most power is going to win.
And so what's wrong with the blacks?
Well, I mean, it depends where you look, because I actually heard of a comedian the other day say that, oh, the only blacks uh, are from Africa, so we don't need to call them African Americans because everybody knows that blacks are from Africa. I thought that was funny because there's a whole black culture in Australia as well, in terms of the Indigenous Australian culture, and then you've got like Papua New Guinea, and they've got blacks in Papua New Guinea, and then I'm in Italy right now, and you've got like a lot of African immigrants in Italy at the moment. So you'd have to say which blacks you mean by that.
So let's deal with the one where you are, the ones in your country where you are now, Italy. Do they love the
Right.
white
So
people? I'm sorry?
no,
They
no.
don't?
Well, I mean, in terms of it's hard to say about do they love the white people, because the thing is with the indigenous people where I live is that they were a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer society until before Australia was colonized. So or until they arrived on the shores of Australia, they basically used to hunt and gather. They hadn't invented the wheel yet. So like this was a culture that was very much uh, they basically just lived off the land. So it's very different to any other culture in the world. So the assimilation process for the Indigenous Australians is one that will probably take 1,000 years. And we're at a stage right now where a lot of these communities, and Australia is a very big place as well, Jesse. So a lot of these communities are literally 1,000 kilometers away from anything else. And they have big problems with drugs, alcohol, abuse, sexual abuse of children. They have big problems. Yeah, like I said, domestic abuse, and it's not good. But it's only a minority of the population. Most of the indigenous population of Australia live in the more urban places. So
Oh, so
it's one of those very
those are the blacks that live out in the woods and they have tents and huts and things like that?
not really. They have like little communities, so it's more in the desert.
Oh,
Australia has a huge desert
oh.
in the middle of it called the Simpson Desert, and you've got the Bruce Highway, which runs right through the middle of Australia. And then up towards the north, you have a lot of indigenous communities where, like, they'll basically have these little townships where it's a little community of just houses and maybe a few medical centers here and there, but it's almost impossible to get proper medical treatment or proper policing or anything there. And in some of these communities, alcoholism is rife. And it's one of those issues that instead of tackling the actual problem, they're now trying to get like a council of people, of Indigenous people, to have a voice to Parliament, which means that anything that affects Indigenous people, they have a say over, which has its own problems. And then they're also trying to change the date of Australia Day, which is the equivalent to American Independence Day, because apparently it's not inclusive. So while they're all arguing about this, there's real problems happening, and it's the same as America. So
And so what's wrong with those blacks over there that they're not innovative like the whites and they can't build and make things nice? Why can't they do it?
well, there are many of them who do it, but the ones in the community specifically, which is like a smaller population of them, the problem is that they don't have access to proper education. And also they've got deeply different cultural customs. Like, for example, they have a coming of age ceremony in those communities where they will have to go what's called walkabouts, which means that they'll go walking about in the desert for weeks and weeks and weeks, living with an elder, and then they'll come back. And one of the problems is that it's shameful for them to associate with other boys who aren't initiated into adulthood. So then it's shameful for them to go to school. So they'll stop going to school. There was a survey done where only about 14% of them were going to school. 14% at all. Big problems with, like I said, in those smaller subsets of the population: sexual abuse, domestic abuse, alcoholism. And this is not something that any of the politicians have the balls to talk about. So the
And,
conversation doesn't get had.
and do they have Black Lives Matter people living in their area?
No, they wouldn't know what that is. These are very remote. Like if you went to those issues, if you went into those cultures and you asked them what Black Lives Matter is, they wouldn't know what the hell you're talking about.
Really? Do they
It's
speak
the ones
English?
whose grandma's grandma was black. They're the ones who worry about Black Lives Matter.
Oh, do they speak
Yeah.
English?
Yes. Yeah, but they've also got their own native languages as well. Many different
Amazing.
ones.
And so, do
Yeah.
you ever go over to South Africa?
I've been there once when I was younger, but my dad was a white South African, and he came from England when he was really young. And in South Africa, unfortunately, it's not the greatest place for white South Africans anymore.
Yeah.
So he's still got friends over there, not much family, but a lot of people are trying to get out of there. I'm sure you would have seen that video that was going around on Twitter, like I think last week I think it was the Black National Party, and they were screaming, "Kill the Boer," and the Boer is the white man, kill the farmer.
Yeah.
So that was my dad was basically a Boer.
Wow. Why don't the white people stand up for themselves over there, especially white men?
In South Africa?
Yes.
I think they do. I think it's a different culture because the farmers are very proud over there. I think that you'd get obviously some of them who don't, but if you're talking about the farmers in particular, many of them just have a gun and they'll just be thinking, this is my home. I've been cultivating this land for generations. And that's why they're not leaving. Otherwise, they'd leave. But I mean, it's also difficult to just pack up and go because who are you going to sell your farm to?
Yeah.
So
amazing.
It's a hard situation. And this is what happens when identity politics takes a hold and is enabled.
Yeah.